Hamilton, and he's now the subject of the most popular play on Broadway, so we can learn a lot about him in that regard, and I'm pleased for that. He comes out of nowhere. He comes out of St. Kitts and the Caribbean, raised in St. Croix. He's a prodigy. Hamilton would have got the highest score on the LSATs, by far. He's also an immigrant, and therefore he doesn't have any state-based affiliation, as Madison does. He goes to King's College. He wants to go to Princeton, but he tells Witherspoon at Princeton that I want to do this in 1 year, and Witherspoon says no, and so he says, I'm going to go to King's College, now Columbia, instead. And he volunteers for the war right away. He becomes an artillery officer. Knox immediately says he's the most brilliant artillery officer I've got. And then Washington picks him up. This keeps happening to Hamilton. He's discovered by people for his staff. Hamilton is the first person to use the word continentalist. Think about this, like, why do they call it the Continental Army? Or the Continental Congress? Because we're not a continent, it's only the East Coast, right? And, but he says you have to learn to think continentally. He writes a series of essays about this. And in the latter stages of the war, he bristles under the confinement of Washington's being an aide-de-camp, and he wants a military command, and so Washington eventually gives it to him at Yorktown, and so he leads this charge across pockmarked fields to take a British redoubt, first over the trenches, hand-to-hand combat against the British commander. Hamilton's brand of leadership is the cavalry charge. He's out in front, and he's so far out in front on this issue, that is movement towards nationhood, that nobody pays any attention to him. But they have a convention in Annapolis to just consider minor trade, interstate commerce matters. It's a total failure because only 5 states show up. But Hamilton comes out of it at the convention, says, all of us present now realize that we need to have a general convention called on the first and the second week of May 1787 to discuss larger questions. So it's like this failure of small effort leads him to claim this is an audacious request, but it coincides with Shays' rebellion, and people are more willing to listen to it. So it's Hamilton that actually makes the proposal for the convention. In the convention, he's so far, he's so extreme in insisting on federal sovereignty. He wants an executive elected for life. He wants the Senate elected, each of them for life. And he gets the reputation as a result of that. Chernow, his best biographer, says that his arguments were brilliant, articulate, and utterly crazy, because they were off the charts in terms of acceptability. But then Hamilton is the organizer of the project called the Federalist Papers. He writes 51 of the 85, and this is considered the American masterpiece, and Washington regards it as such, says so. As long as Hamilton is under the aegis of Washington, he is brilliant, he's productive, he's the greatest Secretary of Treasury in American history. Once Washington retires, Hamilton starts to go off the rails. And if you read some of his correspondence in the late 1790s, the new army, I'm going to form this new army, and I'm going to go down and take Louisiana, and then I'm going to go down and take Mexico, and we can, it's this Napoleonic kind of thing. And he ends up, of course, on the plains of Weehawken in a duel that was unnecessary. Madison, totally different temperament. If God were in the details, Madison would be there to greet him upon arrival. Madison thinks like a lawyer. He's not trained as a lawyer, but Madison says, you give me my client, I will give you the argument. Or you give me who I'm supposed to prosecute, and I will do it. And that's the way he thinks. And watching him think in the spring of 1787 as he's preparing for the convention is really, that's an exercise in, because that's how he gets to the argument about big He knows he needs an argument that justifies a nation-sized republic, because Montesquieu has said that you can't do that. And so what becomes Federalist 10, but he thinks he's not a political philosopher. He doesn't, he's talked about as the great philosopher. He's not a political philosopher. He's a political tactician, brilliant, agile, Karl Rovish kind of guy, and but also a tactician intellectually. When he debates Patrick Henry in the Virginia Ratifying Convention, Henry's the greatest orator of the age. And everybody says, "Oh my God, this little Jimmy Madison." Madison's 5'2.5" and 120 pounds, and he talks with. He has notes all the time. He has notes in his hat. He reads his notes out of his hat. He's going up against this guy Henry, who's a combination of evangelical minister and whatever. And but John Marshall says that yes, Henry is the greatest at the ability to persuade, but Madison is the greatest at the ability to convince. And Madison knows more about the convention than Henry did, and he holds his own, more than holds his own, in those debates in Virginia. Those are some of the great debates. And they had stenographers taking, this is the only one of the ratifying conventions that's happened, word for word, what they particularly said. Madison, by the way, is called the father of the convention and the father of the Constitution. You could argue other people have, Gouverneur Morris has a claim to that, but he is the guy that single-handedly wrote the Bill of Rights, too. He did it in the spring of 1789. So he switches sides soon thereafter and goes over to the Jeffersonian Republicans, which are quasi-anti-federalists. That's the reason I say you don't know if you get to 1861, God knows where Madison is at that particular time.